as indicated, my name is Buntu Manitshana, HOD of Application Development at SETA. So just at a high level, my presentation would be quick. I wish I had a slide less presentation as well, but at least I'll try not to go through lots of slides. So it's a few slides that talk to exactly what SETA is doing. So for those that don't know SETA, SETA is basically the State Information Technology Agency for the government. And we are then responsible for modernizing and digitizing the public sector. So that's what we're focusing on my slide. So can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So if you look at this, what we've done at SETA is we've developed what we call the digital blueprint. Now, the digital blueprint focuses on a number of concepts that I want to touch on, which I'll expand on the later slides that follow. But if you look closely, it's what we're looking for is a fully service and data-driven ecosystem. That's what we want to focus on. And we then what we want to bring in there is practices of such as big data analytics capabilities, digital platforms for the government. And most importantly, one of those is API. And then if you now look at the actual presentation itself and the slide on the right-hand side, if you're looking at what you're trying to achieve in that blueprint is we're trying to look at what you call your IoT. How do we then incorporate those into the citizen world in terms of bringing or improving the citizen experience by also making sure that from our side we provide the relevant platforms that utilize the data that we use. But obviously interconnecting that ecosystem is obviously what we call the API that we're trying to bring in place from a SETA perspective. So whatever we do now going forward is to align with this digital blueprint that we've created for the government, and we're trying to create these platforms and these practices to ensure that our citizens receive the services that is obviously easier for them, as well as to enable the government to be able to deliver the services that they need to deliver to the citizen. If you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this slide now zooms in to say what are the products and delivery practices that we've established at SETA that we've put in place. So we look at here 3 key practices that we're putting in place, which is the DevOps practice, the API consumption practice, as well as the containerization practice. So how do these help the clients, which is the government, and also at the end help the citizenship? So what we're doing with the DevOps practice is we're trying to make sure that we speed the delivery of the service that we do from our side. So it's fast-tracking the delivery of the service. And then from an API perspective, what we're trying to do is to make sure that if I think everyone works within the public sector and understands the government, there's a lot of legacy systems that are in place that we've got, but now we need to modernize those systems. So this is where your API now comes into effect to say we're dealing with all these multiple systems. How do we then make sure that we interconnect these systems to make sure that they then experience the modernization so that we can then take it to the next layer, which is to embrace the open innovation concepts that we want to put in place. And then as we mature, what we want to do from a platform offering. So we're looking at things like your platform as a service, your internet as a service, software as a service. So we want to now move into the concept or the practice of containerization of those to make sure that from that perspective, we are able to deliver that service efficiently, and we also use the resources. So when I talk resources, I'm talking the actual physical resources, but also at the same time talking the human resources to efficiently to provide that service delivery. So the next slide, you can go to it, is going to focus now on these concepts in a bit of detail. Thank you very much. So the other concept then that we're talking about, which I think is sort of highlighting what I was touching on, is if you look on the left-hand side, where we're saying we've got infrastructure as a service, platform, software, and X as a service. So we're saying anything can be done as a service. We're then now expanding further on this concept of what we mean by containers. So within our side, we've got the typical IT environment of non-production, pre-prod, and production. How do we then make sure that we package? So what we mean by this concept of content is to package what we deliver into our citizenship. So you can see on the non-production, we start with a number of things, but we then take those through the life cycle, which at the end of the day we deliver in production. And how we then delivering that is through the concept what we call the DevOps concept, which is then brings that agility in ensuring that our service is delivered at a fast pace and in an agile manner to the citizens, so that they can then be able to consume the services quicker. If you can move to the next slide. So one of the biggest concepts now that I think, and I think the previous speaker touched on was what we call the data. So what we've then done as CETA is we're saying we are the custodian. We host and a lot of the government systems as well as the application. So we're sort of the custodian of data, even though we don't own the data still depends or belongs to the different departments. But one of the things is how do we make sure that we use that data to ensure that we provide hindsight, insights, and foresights to help government to be a data-driven government, a smart government, and improve efficiency and reducing costs. So what we've created is what we call a government-wide enterprise data lake. So if you look on the presentation from the left-hand side, within government, you've got the different departments. So you'll have a department of education, etc. So you've got the different departments which will have their own applications or their own data that sits in there. So if you look now on the slide on the left-hand side, you've got the different departments with their own data sets. But what we're then doing as CETA is we're creating what we call the government-wise, which is what we're looking at, what we call the data lake. Which is a platform now that takes all of that data from the different government, and we centralize that data from our platform point of view, and with the view that this data then will be able to give us the analytics that will then make government work smarter and make the government more efficient and reducing costs. So that's a concept that we're looking at when we're talking about that big data from our side. If you can then move to the next slide. So if now I put this into practical terms, remember from a data point of view, you've got two types of data. You've got the structured data, which comes in the form of the databases, as I indicated previously. But then you've got what we call the unstructured data. This is where now we're talking to the data from the social media, etc. So those data, so our data lake needs to ensure that if we're delivering a service to the government, as an example, we need to ensure that from a point of view, we're able to utilize the data, whether it's coming from the normal, traditional, structured way, or the social, or from the social media. Because if now you're delivering a service now to the people today, there's a lot of feedback that you can get from the social media through the different platforms. So you need to be able to take that data and be able to consume that to be able to help you improve your service delivery. At the same time, also to help you make smarter decision as the government. So what we're doing now, if you look at this from the data, how a data-driven government can work. Again, from the left-hand side, you've got the data sources of where the data is coming from. And then from there, what CETA has also done is we've developed what we call the cloud computing. So we've got our own cloud infrastructure that we've set up. So this is where we host all the applications from our side. And then from that point of view, we then store all this stuff, all this data, because it's massive on the cloud. And then from there, we then want to move into offering data as a service now to the government. So that's a concept that we want to do, because then this helps drive government to be smarter, as well as to ensure that they make more efficient and deliver the service to the citizen in a very dynamic and unique way. And using data as an insight into making those decisions, and also then to assist with the planning in terms of being able to use the data analytics for your forecasting, etc. So that's the concept around this big data, and how we then as CETA are working around in ensuring this thing, that there is a data. So we've already, as an example, established a platform for big data, where now all this data we're taking in and we're putting in this data lake to create all of this information. If you can move to the next one. Okay, so what does all these concepts and these practices mean at the end of the day? I think this is the most important thing. So what we're trying to do is to create what we call an open digital ecosystem. So how does this work, and how does this all come together in terms of the context of the government, in terms of the technology, and then in terms of, at the end of the day, the citizens, how do they then consume all of these things? So again, if you look at this diagram and you're looking at from bottom up, so if you recall, when I started, I spoke about practices that we're establishing. So if you're looking at the left-hand side, where we're saying we're putting a DevOps practice, this is to make sure that we deliver services quicker. So if you look immediately in the middle tier, around that, there's a clock in that orange block. In that orange block, it means the DevOps enable us to deliver solutions and services to the government quicker. Hence, it's quite important. Then I spoke about the big data analytics and the data lakes, which is the middle layer there, where now all the government data sits. And then I touched on the API practices. So the API practices, or the API platform, will then help us to connect all of these disparate and heterogeneous systems into producing what is required by the citizen at the end of the day. But how we're then doing that is we obviously are working, if you're looking now at the top, we're working with the industry. So you will work with the different, what's happening with the industry in terms of the different service providers from the industry in ensuring that we connect and we give the services that's required. And then also from a public sector point of view, which is our clients. So we work with the public sector, and then eventually all of this is then consumed by the citizen. So if you're looking at this open digital ecosystem, this is all this what we're building in order to make sure that we deliver the relevant service to our citizens, and making sure that the government itself is transformed and is able to deliver the services that are required and expected by the citizens in terms of the service delivery. So this is in a very high level and in a nutshell what CETA is doing by trying to enable public administration delivery to the citizens. That, if you go to the last one, that brings me to the end of the presentation.